It was around 11 at night. I was driving to my very first shift at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. I had recently been hired there as a mechanical engineer, having previously worked at a car manufacturing company. I would never have left, but the entire business had gone bankrupt. Some kind of corruption amongst the higher-ups, it seemed. My new role consisted of maintaining the animatronics during the night so that they would be fully functional for the daytime masses. I was still a little worried that I didn't know how animatronics worked properly. The man from the job center who got me the position had told me that my knowledge of cars would be more than enough to handle the task of keeping them maintained. I hoped he was right. As I pulled into the car park, my phone began vibrating in my pocket. I parked up and accepted the call, seeing it was from my new boss.
Hey there, son. I take it you've arrived by now, and I thought it was time I gave you a quick note about your job tonight. You see, the animatronics were built a very long time ago by the company's co-founder, and the spring locks inside their chests are incredibly dangerous and fragile. For your sake, please only work on the circuitry within their headpieces. That's all for now. Good luck.
I didn't even get a chance to respond. He'd hung up immediately after he explained what to look out for. It seemed odd he'd tell me something so important so late. I thought about it for a moment, but soon realized I had better get started soon. I only had until 6 a.m. to get everything sorted for tomorrow. After getting out of my car, I went around to the boot and reached inside to grab my toolbox. Once it was in my hands, I locked the car and made my way to the front door. Once inside, I began making my way through the entrance corridor. Only a couple of seconds had passed before I heard the pad of footsteps coming from my side. All of a sudden, from around the corner came what looked to be a security guard. His hair was greasy and his eyes were bloodshot. He spoke gruffly.
Hiya! You're John, right? The new mechanic?
He said. I found the voice familiar. Yeah.
Well, you sure have your work cut out for you. They're all in the back, down the hall and to the left.
He then moved past me, slapping me on the back as he walked off. Nervously, I began to head towards the location given to me by the guard. As I trekked through the carpeted halls, an air of nostalgia came over me. I used to be a fan of this place as a kid. Every Sunday, straight after sports practice, my father would take me here for lunch. He used to tell me that my mom would have loved to have been there too. She died giving birth to me. The thought of it made my stomach churn. In almost no time, I had made it to a door labeled restricted. I stared at it for a while, the red words seeming to be oozing off of the door, as if newly painted. I soon snapped out of it, and finally pushed it open, making my way inside. The instant my body crossed over the doorway, I paused. My eyes suddenly filled with awe as I stood there trying to take in the countless animatronics all over the place. They weren't the main four, but they had the same feeling either way. The colossal pieces of mechanical genius stared back at me, their eyes lifeless. Trying to regain focus, I decided it was time to get to work. I remembered that the one closest to me resembled some kind of a pink hippo holding a guitar. Feeling a little intimidated, I slowly crept over to it. Carefully, I set the toolbox down below it and peered inside the mouth, searching for the circuit board. I was surprised by how razor-sharp the inside of it was. Immediately, I imagined what would happen if someone were to get their hand stuck in it. It was a nasty, bloody image. As I looked around the mouth, I was finally able to spot the circuit board wedged all the way back at the entrance of the throat. To my surprise, I knew exactly what tool was needed to check it. I bent down to grab it. That was the moment I heard the door behind me starting to creak open. I waited for a second, my eyes locked on the toolbox. I made sure to keep my body angled so that I could see the door. My mind whirred. In total shock, I watched as the security guard poked his head in, being careful not to move the door too much so he could remain hidden. His face had almost completely changed. His smile had gone and was replaced by this horrific grin that practically screamed the words, "I'm going to kill you." My skin crawled as I saw him move closer inside, still thinking I hadn't seen him. I could easily tell that he wanted to hurt me. To try and protect myself, I reached my hand into the toolbox, as if working as usual. only this time I was grabbing the screwdriver. Just as my fingers gripped it, the hippo animatronic in front of me whirred to life. The room was filled with bright, flashy colors alongside a song being sung by the hippo himself. At the same time, the guard suddenly launched himself in my direction, revealing a large hunting knife from behind his back. Without any hesitation, I responded by swiveling around, only to be hit in the face by one of the guard's knees, throwing me back onto the floor. The second I hit the ground, he threw his body on top of me with his knife at the ready. The screwdriver had already fallen out of my hands, but as he landed on my legs, I was able to throw him up into the air with one powerful kick, fueled by adrenaline. Somehow, the force of the kick was so strong that he lifted straight up into the air, right as the hippo dislocated its mouth, trapping the guard's head with its metal jaws and beheading him shortly after. The corpse landed flat with a thud next to me. My eyes were wild with fear. Not knowing what else to do, I chose to run away, hearing the sound of metal scraping against bone and flesh on my way out. As soon as I left the building, I called the police. In under an hour, the police arrived, and an investigation was carried out all over the establishment. I heard back from them the very next day. The body was gone. There wasn't even any splatters of blood. The only thing out of place was the hippo animatronic. It had fallen over on its front. I also discovered that on the shift timetable, there was never even a guard shift that night because I was there to keep watch. My mind still struggles to understand who the freak was, how he got the guard uniform, and why he wanted to kill me. And most of all, why did the boss's voice sound so similar to his? I quit the day after, and I haven't gone back since. The moment I stepped back into my hometown, the air felt different, heavier, as if saturated with unspoken accusations and fear. My name is John, once just a common name, which had now become a synonym for something dark and sinister. Growing up, I was the nicest guy one could meet, and then one day, I had joined the League of people like Ted Bundy and Ed Kemper. Netflix even did a popular true crime series about me some time back. I hadn't seen it, but I was told it became really popular. People on the streets in my hometown glanced my way with a mix of curiosity and fear. Mothers pulled their children close, and whispers followed me like a shadow. The weight of my past was a tangible force pressing down on me. I found myself drawn to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. The place was a decaying husk of its former self. The vibrant colors had faded, and the laughter that once filled the air was now just an echo in my mind. Shattered windows covered in dust and grime stared back at me like hollow eyes. The walls were canvases for strange graffiti, symbols that seemed to hold some dark meaning I couldn't decipher. Pushing open the door, a chorus of creaks and groans greeted me, as if the building itself was lamenting its fate. The inside was a time capsule, a snapshot of the day my life changed forever. The sight of the main stage brought a rush of memories, each one a sharp jab to my heart. It was there, in the spotlight of joy and innocence, that a child's life had been tragically cut short, and I was there. I sat on the edge of the stage, the silence around me oppressive. The dust in the air danced in the slivers of light piercing through the broken windows. In that solitude, a tear escaped, a silent testament to the injustice, to the years stolen from me, and the innocent life lost. Exploring the pizzeria was like navigating through a haunted maze. Each corner held shadows of laughter and screams, each room a story untold. The animatronics, once the stars of the show, now stood as grotesque sentinels, their peeling paint and lifeless eyes a mockery of their former glory. The silence was unnerving, filled with the whispers of a past that refused to die. In the depths of the security office, amidst a clutter of forgotten items, I found them. Old newspaper clippings, police reports, a dossier of the nightmare that enveloped my life. As I sifted through them, a horrifying picture began to emerge. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together, revealing a truth more chilling than I had ever imagined. There were inconsistencies, unexplained phenomena, witnesses speaking of shadows and eerie voices. It wasn't just a murder. It was something beyond the realm of the living. But of course, no one believed. As darkness enveloped the pizzeria, its haunted nature became more pronounced. Lights flickered as if struggling to maintain their grip on reality. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to emanate from the walls, the ceiling, and the very air I breathed. And then I saw it. The animatronics seemed to twitch and move in the periphery of my vision. It was impossible. The place had been closed for decades. I had wondered if whatever sinister was at play that night would still be around. It seems like it never left. Then came the voice, a sinister whisper that cut through the chaos as it said, "John the Ripper." The nickname, a cruel reminder of the false identity forced upon me, echoed through the halls. The next moment, I was seeing visions play out before my eyes. The screams from that fateful day, the stampede in the crowd, short circuits and fires, and then the body of a child lying at my feet on the main stage. And that is when I saw an animatronic of Freddy Fazbear come to life before my eyes. "Welcome back, John," it said. "Here for round 2. I stood in the heart of the pizzeria, a man wronged by both the living and the dead. I steeled myself for the confrontation that lay ahead. Freddy leapt after me, its old rusty parts groaning, his red eyes flickering. It scared me a decade ago as well when I worked there, but now it was straight out of a nightmare. It had caught me off guard back then, framed me for the murder of the child, but it didn't know that this time I came prepared. I pulled out a powder from my pocket and hurled it ahead like a snowball. Freddy stopped in its tracks, paralyzed. In prison, amidst the despair and desolation, I'd found an unlikely mentor, a Mexican bunkmate who had whispered to me ancient rituals and chants, tools to communicate and, if need be, combat the dead. The pizzeria, now a battleground, echoed with the sinister laughter of the spirit. It was enjoying the challenge. All the other animatronics stirred to life as well, their movements jerky and unnatural. As they advanced towards me, their metal limbs creaking and whirring, I remembered the words of my bunkmate, the incantations he had taught me. My voice, steady despite the terror, filled the air with ancient chants, a language forgotten by time but remembered by the dead. The chase was a nightmare brought to life. I weaved through the maze of tables and games, the animatronics in restless pursuit. Their once joyful expressions were now twisted into ghastly sneers. I lured the animatronics to the main stage, the heart of the pizzeria, and the epicenter of my sorrow. My time in prison had not just been spent on learning chants. I had also picked up a thing or two about electricity. In the days leading to this night, I had rigged the pizzeria's electrical system, turning the stage into a trap. The showdown was tense, a dance with death itself. The animatronics, their movements erratic and violent, closed in on me, but I stood my ground, chanting louder, my voice echoing through the hollow shell of the pizzeria. With a final incantation and a surge of electricity, the trap was sprung. Brilliant arcs of electricity danced around the stage, catching the animatronics in a web of high voltage. Their movements became spasmodic, then ceased altogether as the power overwhelmed them. In that electric light, the spirit finally materialized, its form a swirling vortex of shadows. It screamed in rage and pain, the sound a chilling symphony of the tormented souls it had ensnared. But the chants and the electrical trap were too much. With a final ear-splitting wail, the spirit dissipated, its presence evaporating like mist in the morning sun. The animatronics collapsed, their lifeless forms now just hollow shells of metal and wires. The dark atmosphere lifted, replaced by a profound silence. I felt the weight of a decade's burden lift from my shoulders, a freedom that was both physical and spiritual. As I turned to leave, a faint apparition appeared before me. It was the child, the victim of the spirit's evil game. He looked at me, a smile gracing his ethereal face, a silent acknowledgement of the truth finally revealed. And then, like a whisper on the wind, he vanished. Stepping out of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, the night air felt different, lighter. The stars above shone a little brighter, a silent testament to the justice reclaimed. I walked away from the pizzeria, my steps unburdened, a man freed from the chains of an unjust past and a haunting present. The night embraced me, not as the Ripper, but as John, a man finally at peace.
Hey guys, my name is Tom. Like most of you, I grew up playing horror games. I was always more of a horror game fan. But whether it was how scared I was in the beginning, how hard I struggled with getting through Night 7, or how much I talked about it with my friends, I have to admit that Five Nights at Freddy's always had a special place in my heart. So you can imagine how excited I was when I found out they built a Five Nights at Freddy's inspired restaurant near my house. The first thing I did when they opened was drop off my resume. I really wanted to work there, as that game was a big part of my childhood. I didn't leave my resume alone, as my friend Ralph was just as obsessed with the game as I was. After dropping off our resumes, we had a group interview where we both did very well. Shortly thereafter, I was told that we were both accepted for the job, so you can imagine how ecstatic we were. Little did I know that this beautiful experience would turn into a nightmare from which I could never wake up. It all started on our first week of work. As I told you, I was very happy. But Ralph was something else. He was having the time of his life, enjoying working at the restaurant like it was the best thing that ever happened to him. All day long, he would talk about Five Nights at Freddy's and how similar the restaurant was. At this point, he even seemed obsessed. At work, everyone made fun of him. Everyone asked him questions about the game just to tease him, and no one took him seriously. Ralph was my friend, and I was the only one who knew what he went through when he was younger, so it didn't seem right to make fun of him. But no one cared. Little by little, we got used to the restaurant. Ralph, though, didn't calm down. Listening to him talk about his little obsession became a regular occurrence. Everything was normal. Until that day. That day, everyone was working in the restaurant, as it was a special day. The whole restaurant had been rented out for a big party for some rich kid's birthday. The day was quite difficult as we were asked for things non-stop, and we even had to dress up as the animatronics from the video game. We were all stressed out except for Ralph. He was the only one who liked to get into character, and he played until the customers left. I couldn't help but notice that there was something off about him. His eyes seemed unfocused, and his gaze was lost. In their innocence, the children were having fun, but none of them paid attention to the fact that next to them, there was a terrifying face staring back at them. When it was time for the children to leave, we all began to settle in to open the restaurant to the public. But something happened. A mother started running around the restaurant in desperation, saying that her son was missing. The boy was no more than 5 years old, and according to his mother, he was quite shy and would never run away on his own. We searched the entire restaurant. While some went to look for him outside, I was sent to look for him in the basement. I walked slowly through the place, listening carefully to see if the boy was crying. Once I was downstairs, the nightmare began. Someone downstairs, in the dark, came up the stairs to close the door. The darkness took over the entire room, and only the sound of this person's footsteps could be heard. One step after another, after another, after another. I didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but his very presence had frightened me so much that I was paralyzed. Once he came back down, some dim lights came on and revealed the identity of the person. It was Ralph, but something had changed about him. His face was red and bruised, his smile was obsessive, and his eyes were lost in madness. Ralph was totally out of his mind. Ralph, you have the child, don't you? Of course I do. I left him in Chica for when it's time to use him. It spoke to you too, didn't it? This may not be the real Fazbear's Pizza, but this restaurant has been talking to me ever since I came here. Don't you see, Tom? It all adds up. Ralph, tell me the truth. Have you stopped taking your pills?
It doesn't matter. What matters is that the restaurant has told me everything. Don't you see? The bite of 87. This restaurant wants me to recreate it.
Listen, Ralph, you won't do anything to that kid. You know you're sick. You have to take your pills or the hallucinations start, remember? Suddenly, Ralph reached out and the lights went out again. Slowly, I began to hear his footsteps again in the darkness. These footsteps were not going in any specific direction, but were surrounding me. The room was completely silent, but I could feel him breathing heavily, and this terrified me even more. Tom, I think I'm a little bit upset. I don't want to hurt you, but I think I'm about to do it. Suddenly, many of the animatronics in the place lit up, as if someone had done it by remote control. Upbeat music and movement took over the whole room. I knew Ralph was about to hurt me, but at that moment, all I could think about was the boy. I rushed to Chica's suit, and after opening her mouth, I pulled the boy out. He had his eyes closed and a big bump on his head, but he was alive. Meanwhile, Ralph still didn't make his move. He just kept walking, stalking me, ready to attack me when he saw it necessary. I picked up the boy and started running as fast as I could. I ran up the stairs in the dark, but I felt something pull me by the foot. It was Ralph, crying loudly. He grabbed my foot and tried to bite it. But I kicked him with my other foot and he fell down the stairs. Once on the floor, I could see him in the center of the basement. He was no longer trying to catch me, but was violently punching himself, all the while laughing like a psycho.
Hey, Tom! You think if I hit myself enough, I can become like the purple guy?
And at the image of my friend hitting himself over and over again without stopping, I left the place and left him locked up. The boy's family was very grateful, but needless to say, that was Ralph's last day at the place. When the police arrived at Ralph's house, his family was also dead on the floor. They had been dead for days. Ralph killed them with his own fists. Apparently, my friend wasn't taking the pill that stabilized his schizophrenia, and he began to think the restaurant was possessed. Ralph needed professional help, and today he's more stable, on my own. I could never again play Five Nights at Freddy's or go to the restaurant. I know it's a completely ordinary place, but every time I go in, I still remember Ralph telling me that the restaurant was talking to him. I know it's illogical and makes no sense, but why bother? I'd rather not even go there.